All right, well, I can't see any faces, so I'm going to request that we keep this conversation going in the chat. So if you have a question as I'm going along, please put your question in the chat. It helps me know that you're there and with me. If you like something I say or don't like something I say and you want to react to it, please do. It helps these webinars not feel like I'm talking into the ether. So the more you interact with me, the easier it is for me to make sure we're meeting your needs and what you hoped to get from this session. So we are here today to talk about lean portfolio management. As you know, SoftEd has a class, or hopefully as you know, you'll know now, SoftEd has a class on lean portfolio management. And this is a little primer to give you a taste of some of the stuff we talk about in that class, but also maybe give you some resources and ideas that you can take forward. As we go through on some of the slides, you'll see a QR code. Those QR codes goes to resources or deeper reading if there's a topic on there you want to dig into. A little bit about me. I've been teaching with SoftEd for several years now. I've been an Agile coach since 2014 and an enterprise Agile coach the past, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, depending on where you slice the line. I've been working more and more in the product spaces, helping coach product owners, product managers, project managers, portfolio managers on how to live and breathe more agilely. In addition to working with SoftEd, I also have my own consultancy. Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and connect, particularly if there's follow-up questions you'd like to have a conversation with offline. Before I jump in, does anybody have any questions for me or about what we're about to get into? Okay, I will do pauses like that when I ask questions just to make sure nothing pops up in chat, but don't feel like because I've moved on, you can't ask. So feel free to ask questions as we go. So we're going to start with what is LPM and why should we use it? So actually the other way around, we're going to say, why should we use it and what is it? So the first thing we want to just remember is that business agility is the sort of developing world of Agile these days. Agile started in manufacturing. It started with the lean portfolio or lean methods through Toyota and then moved into IT. IT standing on Scrum and several other frameworks out there. The Agile Manifesto was created in 2001, and now we're moving into the age of business agility, where we take Agile out of IT and move it over into the business so that all of the sectors of the business are moving in an Agile way. Agile works best in complex environments, and most business is complex. So we think of that in the space of VUCA. So that little grid on the left, VUCA, it is not in order, sorry. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. What are some signs? I'm going to ask you to just chat this while I keep going. What are some signs and symptoms that your work is complex? I find that I never quite know what's coming next around the corner. Certainly, I think the pandemic was a good example of complexity and uncertainty. We certainly didn't see it coming. We didn't have any plans for it. And the situation around that was very volatile. We didn't know when we were going to get to go back into the world. And it stayed around long enough that we've stabilized, several of us stabilized in work from home land, and find that more enriching than working from an office. And folks are working to figure out whether or not they're going to stay in the office or they're going to move out of the office. So a response to this VUCA space, this complexity, is to move to a more experimental sense and respond method of doing business. And when we say sense and respond, you look at what's going on around you, you take small, short experimental tests into that environment. You choose a response, you see what data you get back, and then you choose your next response. So the days of gigantic projects that are fully funded and they last years and years and years, doesn't map to this world anymore. And one of the things that you'll see in the business agility spaces and in lean portfolio management is we actually have to move not just the way we do delivery, but also the way we support that delivery. And business agility is about that. So this diagram on the right comes from the Business Agility Institute. And we can see several areas here. So people first leadership, that jives with the agile value of individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Responsive customer centricity. Now we're really looking to put the customer first. An engaged culture. This is a particular niche sweet spot of mine. So engaged cultures are people who are excited to come to work every day, who want to be there, who want to move things forward, and are happy to stay there. Disengaged or almost neutral folks, they're not excited to be there, and they would be open to leaving. And then actively disengaged folks, so this is like the next tier of disengagement, they not only are they not engaged, they also feel trapped. And that feeling of trapped means that they're like uh, the the bad apple ruins the bunch. That's the bad apples. And it's not that they're bad, it's that they have a bad feeling about being there. They're actively disengaged, and they also don't feel like they can leave. And so they're not just, would they be open to an opportunity? Sure, but they don't even look because they don't know they can. So this engaged culture can really drive this whole thing, and that people first leadership and engaged culture spaces really work together in business agility. And then we move into value-based delivery. So this customer centricity, responsive customer centricity, and value-based delivery work together. You have to respond to your customers, and your customers define what value means, typically. Your customers don't have to just be external to your organization. They can be internal. Wouldn't it be nice if our internal products made us as happy as we make our external customers? And then the final one is flexible operations. You have to be willing to operate in new and experimental ways, which means we can't do big bang budgeting and planning models anymore. And if you're a portfolio manager and you've moved up the channel through project management, then what you know is big bang planning. So lean portfolio management really opens up the possibilities for what else could we do. Cheatin, the webinar will be saved, so you will get to see that later. Thank you for that question. Don't worry about taking notes. All right, so the principles of lean portfolio management. We have, to count them real quick, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 principles of lean portfolio management. Just like all the other models that we have out there, it's important to be anchored in principles. When you look at these 9 principles, what are most interesting to you? I'm gonna pause for a second and see what we've got. Yeah, outcomes over outputs. And it's interesting, when I teach this class, you have to create an outcome statements. And outcome statements are really hard to land in. Outputs are things like, how many features did we deliver? Outcome statements are, did we increase or decrease customer satisfaction? That would be an outcome statement. Structuring in value streams. So when we talk about value streams, it can get conflated with the Six Sigma form of value streaming, which is a powerful tool inside this space. But when we think about structuring and value streams, we're aligning to the Agile principle of building projects around motivated individuals and giving them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. The intention is to break down functional silos and instead organize the people and work around the value being delivered for a customer or customer segment. Imagine what it would be like if you went to the hospital for an emergency and you had a person that was like your assigned person who walked you through the whole process. They got you checked in, and they were with you as you were going through the procedural process, and they were with you as you went through the billing process, and they could explain any questions you had or confusion you had along the way, and they were an advocate for you. That would be an example of a value stream. As a customer, I come into the hospital, I have a procedure, and I have billing on the other side. And if I had an advocate that walked me the whole way through, now I have a full value stream for understanding that process. Let me see what else. Optimize Why not optimize flow and reduce waste? Why not optimize flow and reduce waste? I think optimizing flow and reducing waste, this really anchors into the lean part of lean portfolio management. Lean's first principle is eliminate waste. So eliminating waste is a perfection we may never achieve, but we can certainly focus on the flow of work through the system and reduce waste where it's appropriate. Sometimes it's appropriate to have waste. And for example, if you were running a restaurant, you don't exactly know all of the times that you'll be busy. Maybe you get surprised with extra people. So having extra customers, so having an extra person on staff that could pick up the slack would handle some of that unexpected influx of demand and offer an opportunity to reduce waste on the other side. Tracy, this lean portfolio management is the IC Agile aligned. We do tend to a little bit of things that SAFe does, but we take it from the original creators of it and not from SAFe. So SAFe is a separate learning environment. It's not misaligned because lean portfolio management is lean portfolio management, but it is slimmer than what SAFe offers. All right, so that's the what and why of lean portfolio management, although it's really the why and then the what of lean portfolio management. Let's take a look at what prioritization and alignment techniques look like at the portfolio level. So at the portfolio level, you're really focused on strategy, and strategy is really looking for the how will you win question. And you could take a broad market share. So let's say you want to hit lots of customers. Walmart is a really good example of that. They've got broad market share. They're trying to pull everybody in, and they're doing it in a low cost way. So broad market share, low cost. Meanwhile, Apple and Starbucks, they're doing it in a slightly more differentiation way. So Starbucks differentiates because they like to have their coffee shops feel like a community space. And Apple is breaking with the status quo. I'm not an Apple user, so I think that's still their strategy. And I apologize if I've gotten that wrong. So broad market share differentiation on the right, and then broad market share low cost on the left. As we move down to the bottom, we see a narrower niche market. So Tesla is a niche market, though it may be becoming less niche. Right now, it's a niche market in the electric vehicle business, and it's trying to differentiate as being a very, it's almost a status symbol, right? Rolex too has a status symbol feel to it. Narrow niche market of people that can purchase these items, and they're differentiating in those ways. Meanwhile, and you may not even know these because not all of them are US based, but low cost narrow niche, they tend to stay more regional or local. So Ryanair is an airline that I don't believe is in the US. Airlines are not my specialty. I apologize if I got that wrong. And then Casio is a watch brand. So it's a competing watch brand with Casio, but it went for the with Rolex, but it went for the low cost approach instead of the differentiation approach. Casio isn't a status symbol, but you can get them pretty inexpensively, and I think you can even get them at Walmart. So that's a different approach to strategy that we're talking about here. And a lean portfolio manager is looking to have these conversations with the business and really drive what they're after from their strategy. Let me just pause here. Are there any questions about this context? Okay. Once you have your strategy in place, which cost structure are you going to use? Which marketing approach are you going to use? What means differentiation? Yes, something unique. Tracy, differentiation is uniqueness or a competitive advantage. So I'm trying to think of something really fast. I don't have one quick to mind, but the ones we had over there, Starbucks really is trying to differentiate by creating community. So that's its uniqueness. It's not like going to Dunkin' Donuts, which is not set up for community to get coffee. Okay. Local mom and pop coffee shops often differentiate on their mom and popness, but they, if we go back up, a local coffee shop was probably going for more low cost. They have a, I'm sorry, they're going for differentiation, but they're doing a narrow niche market. They're really in a local space where Starbucks is trying to hit broad market share. Okay, so once you've got your sort of strategic approach, this is the cost structure we're going to use, this is the market that the market share we're looking for, you then are going to have probably more than one body of work that moves towards that strategic objective. And you have to decide how you're going to split up your portfolio for run the business, new business, and R&D. These are also called core, that would be run the business. Adjacent would be new business, and then transformational would be R&D. So these are two different ways to look at that. An example, so the run the business or the core products, you're optimizing existing products for existing customers. When you move into new business or adjacent, we are expanding from the existing business into new to the company business. So it could be new markets, it could be new regions, it could be new industries. And I want to just clarify for a second, when I say the word market here, I mean people. We're expanding into new customers, new business, that style. And then when we get into R&D, this is developing breakthrough innovations or new things that don't exist in the market. And it might also be new things that don't exist in your market with your products. So maybe you're watching Google and Meta and Amazon all go after AI right now, and you start to do some R&D in AI. That would be an example of a breakthrough innovation. All right, so first strategy, what's our cost structure? What's our market share? And then now, how do our products help support that strategy? And how will we align our portfolio appropriately? When we talk about portfolio mix, it isn't just which products in which places or which projects in which places, it's also what money in which places. General rule of thumb, you want to do less, not more. And really like put the whole mass of your workforce behind the thing that's the most important, just like we would do on a Scrum team, where a Scrum team has, these are the 5 user stories we've committed to. The number one user story, we're all going to swarm. Everybody's going to work on that one that can, and then we'll pick up number 2, and everybody else will work on that can, and then we'll pick up number 3. Instead of 5 different people working on 5 different user stories, you want to do the same thing at your strategic level, and really focus on getting that number one thing over the finish line. And though it feels counterintuitive, it actually speeds up your productivity across all of your products and ideas. As you can imagine, prioritizing at the portfolio level is a bit harder. It's not as cut and dry as a user story. It's certainly not as cut and dry as an epic or feature. We're really talking about big piles of money up here at the top. So these are 3 different models that you can research. The purpose alignment model takes low versus high market differentiation. So it does a 4-grid 2, low versus high market differentiation versus low against low versus high mission critical. So high in both is differentiation. So high differentiation is differentiating rather. So if you have high market differentiation and high mission critical, that is a differentiating product. Boy, it's a lot of differentiating in this. It will create a unique product for your space. If you get high market differentiation and low mission critical, what you found is a place to partner with somebody that maybe you don't put the time and effort into that, but you might hire in somebody to partner and help build that business. If it's high market differentiation but low mission critical, this is parity. The rest of the world is already doing this and you have to do it. I can't imagine going to a web app, an online app for ordering food, and not being able to look at the whole menu and customize food these days, or customize my order. So that would be what's considered parity. And then if it's low in both, it's low market differentiation and low mission critical, who cares? Why would we do it at all? So this is really useful. The purpose alignment model is really useful for gaining alignment on both market differentiation and market parity. The BCG growth matrix, useful for helping companies decide how to prioritize their different businesses. So under Elon Musk, we have Tesla, we have Twitter. I'm missing one. Oh, SpaceX, that's the other one. So he's got three different businesses. And if those were all under one umbrella, they would have to decide which one's most important, because there can be only one number one. It's like Highlander. And here it's another box grid, and they go growth versus market share is the thing that they're working on. So low growth, high share. Companies could use these to build lots of cash. So they're basically the cash cows. I would say for Musk's work, probably that's Tesla at this point. They're just, hopefully, I haven't looked at their business in a while, but hopefully they're raking in money and they're reinvesting it back into the business or into other businesses. High growth, high market share. The companies should significantly invest in these. These are basically the stars: high growth, high share, and have a lot of high future potential. I think that's what SpaceX was for Musk. It's probably going to end up being a differentiator because not everybody can afford to go to space. But the NASA will use them. Other countries will use them to get satellites into space and things like that. So it also has a lot of money potential. High growth, low share. So this is where you could take them or not, depending on their chances of becoming stars. And I think that's where SpaceX started, and they're starting to find the proof in the pudding. They are running into some trouble with the FDA. And then low share, low growth. This is a place where companies should liquidate, divest, or reposition. These are basically pet projects, and they need to go away. If it doesn't have high market share or high growth, why would we spend our time there? The third one here is the cost of delay or weighted shortest job first. So cost of delay actually came first. Weighted shortest job first was SAFE's rebranding of it. And it is useful for aligning diverse stakeholders. One of the things I love about these models is that it's a formula, and the cost of delay metric includes things like business value, time criticality, risk retention, and opportunity enablement. And when you get a whole bunch of diverse folks in a space and get them to align on what those things mean, then you can start doing an agreement. Now, people will game systems, but at least it's a start towards aligning stakeholders. So for example, if I was a sales manager, I'm going to be interested in number of sales or revenue from sales. If I was a customer service manager, like I'm running a customer service desk, I'm interested in customer service ratings. What percentage of customer service ratings increase equals how much sales revenue? And now those two people can have that conversation. They're probably guessing. Most of us guess at this level, but they can have that conversation and align. And they say $1 million sale equals a 10% increase in customer satisfaction. And now when we have a request that comes in where the value is customer satisfaction, we know what the equity is to revenue. So I find this one really useful, just about one layer down from the portfolio. When you're transitioning from portfolio into programming or into the program, I find this one to be incredibly useful. All right, that was a lot of information. If I need to go back at all, let me know, but I'm going to pause here to see what questions we have. Oh, I see what you're saying, Tracy. So it may be difficult for stories because the value for stories is so tiny. Um, uh, as a user, I want to put items in my shopping cart so that I can purchase them. The so that I can purchase them is the benefit, and being able to figure out the percent increase in customer satisfaction that little tiny thing is, or the amount of revenue it might change, is really hard to touch on. So for stories, you may find another method works better, but you may also find that you could do that, and you just define it a different layer. So it may be difficult for user stories, but it's not impossible. It would take somebody really facilitating that conversation in a way that's helpful. I have used it before at the story level, and we dropped out things like risk retention and opportunity enablement went away, and we just went with perceived business value. And time criticality as our top end of that. So you may have to alter it to achieve that at the user story level, but it can be done. It's just, it might be difficult. Does that help? Cool. Great. Well, let's drop now into adaptive portfolio. Our portfolio can't say the same. If we didn't change with the feedback that we're getting, we wouldn't really be agile. Everything that we put out into the world is an experiment, and that experiment is an opportunity to hear back from our customers and adjust our course. So one of the models that might be useful to you is the desirability, viability, feasibility model, or the DVF. This is another one you can formulate like the cost of delay. You do desirability plus viability divided by feasibility, and you get a similar prioritization approach. But at the portfolio level, you have to ask good questions to make sure all three of these are tended to. You aren't making the decisions here as a portfolio manager. You're asking things about these questions. So how will we ensure we're doing the right things? How will we ensure we're making economically sound decisions? And how will we ensure that we are building high quality, sustainable goods and services? And that's the essence of the portfolio. It is it's almost like a check and balance, the portfolio, keeping an eye on things, making sure we're making the best choices we can, and that we're learning from the choices that ended up being not great. That's the idea. And I'm going to actually share a very brief video on this next slide that talks a little bit about what this experimental approach looks like in the world. So we're going to watch a little video on slime mold. Feel free to chat with me as we go along.
This is a pretty simple maze. It shouldn't be too hard for you to solve. Of course, you're pretty smart. You've got 86 billion neurons at your disposal. You're a member of the most intelligent species on the planet. But what if you were a pulsating wad of yellow goo? I'm gonna let my friend Amy from Deep Look introduce you.
This is Physarum polycephalum, a slime mold, which sounds like something you might find on stale bread, but it's not a fungus. It's a jelly-like protist. You can think of it like one big cell holding millions of nuclei, and they might not seem like much, but slime molds are smarter than they look. Just watch.
This slime mold can solve mazes. It does so by first exploring every path, and then when it's found the food at either end, it retracts any paths that don't connect the points. Solving a maze involves remembering where you've been. Where does a single-celled ball of goo hold memories? Physarum does this by leaving chemical trails to mark dead ends, so it can remember where it's already explored. When slime molds are presented with a maze that has more than one solution, they'll even figure out the shortest one. No matter the shape, they'll almost always connect distributed food sources by the shortest path. If that doesn't impress you, realize that once you start adding points, mapping efficient networks is an incredibly complex problem that humans need big computers and complex math to solve. This living ooze is redefining what it means to be intelligent. They've even been able to map the rail system of Tokyo and the major highways of the United Kingdom. Another kind of slime mold shows a different kind of smarts. This is Dictyostelium, a cellular slime mold. Now, instead of a creeping blob, this slime mold lives most of its life as single free-living amoeba, gulping up bacteria. But when it runs out of food, something amazing happens.
One cell starts emitting a chemical. This attracts other cells, and once they join up, those cells start emitting chemical pulses of their own. This is called chemotaxis, and the bigger the mass gets, the stronger that signal, until eventually there's tens or hundreds of thousands stuck together.
These once free-living cells now cooperate like a multicellular organism, coming together like Voltron and moving in unison. This slug travels farther and faster than any single cell could on its own. It's about to undergo a second incredible transformation.
After the slug migrates away, it flattens itself and begins to sprout. A thin stalk grows out, lifting a fruiting body into the air. From here, spores will be released to be collected by passing insects and carried to plentiful food.
What's amazing is the cells making up the stalk die. They sacrifice themselves so other cells can live on. It's not that different from what a wheat plant does, growing, dying off, and releasing the next generation into the wind. But a plant lives its whole life as a multicellular organism. These amoeba are separate individuals, yet they're acting for the benefit of others. This is a principle called altruism. It goes against what we might expect from natural selection, that every individual wants to succeed and pass its own genes on. But altruism suggests that helping the group that we're genetically related to can help the entire species survive. We see this in animals hunting together, worker bees tending to the queen, meerkats standing guard over their dens, or chimpanzees sharing food. But these slimy species especially challenge what we think of as intelligence, because so many of our preconceived notions don't fit what we see. Anthropologist Jeremy Narby writes, "We struggle over words when the slime mold solves the maze because our concepts don't fit the data. It's not that nature lacks intelligence, but that our own concepts do." What he means is any view of nature that puts humans in a separate category isn't a very good view of nature at all. And if something as simple as a slime mold can solve problems, can come together and cooperate for the good of the group, it's a nice reminder
That if the goo can do it, so can we.
if you want to get an up-close look at how slime molds move and...
All right. So I see the 2 questions in chat. Bear with me. I'm going to come right back to those. I want to make sure we talk a little bit about slime mold some more. So slime mold success is about exploration, and a portfolio's success is also about exploration. So we have to be willing to risk a little to go explore and see if that's the right direction to go in. And most traditional organizations have a hard time with that, especially if they're reporting to a board and have to give out financial numbers to the stock market. It can be really hard because the company becomes hyper-focused on viability, which actually brings me to the question that Paul asked in chat, which is the viability strictly anchored to money. I would say the time it's not strictly anchored to money is in nonprofits or not-for-profits. But viability is really about, are we making enough money to continue to provide the value that we've been providing? Or are we making enough money to continue to provide the value that we've been providing and to enhance the value that we've been providing? So viability is really the fuel that feeds the other 2. If you have viability, but you don't have desirability, you won't continue to make money to continue to feed the business. It's like it's like the food chain, right? You've got to take food in and you spit out ideally value, and then somebody picks up that value and provides food back to you, right? That's the fuel that's going on here. So if you've got something that's desirable and feasible but not viable, you'll go out of business. You won't be able to afford to keep going. If you have something that's desirable and viable but not feasible, it's probably an R&D project or a pipe dream. And if you have something that is feasible and viable but not desirable, it's very easy to disrupt that. So viable is often anchored to money, but sometimes it's money disguised as other things like scope, resources, time. Those are all just money disguised as other things. And then the meaning of portfolio in this whole thing is the group of, I want you to think about it like your investments. So if you've got a 401k and you've invested in several different aspects with the goal of being able to retire and be comfortable, then that's essentially where we are in the portfolio. It's the same in a business. Where am I going to spend my money and my people and the time of the people that work for me so that we can deliver on the value we hope to deliver for our customers? That's ultimately what we're talking about, a portfolio. In conventional terms, that is project, program, portfolio. But we're going to take the portfolio wider, and we're going to look at it as a whole company systems approach instead of just in project management language. Very good advocates for viability. If you've got, your product people tend to sit right in the middle. They're trying to balance all 3 of these. Your customers live in desirability. The people who deliver value, and this doesn't have to be technology. It could be, let's say you're a company that does standard legal contracts. Then your lawyers live in your feasibility space, not technologists. So whatever the technology is that you're building on, we still want quality, sustainable goods and services. And then viability, some of the best advocates for viability are often people who grew up in their careers in project management, because they understand business risk, and they usually have an eye out for that. All right, Paul, Jaden, did I do okay there? And I apologize if I'm saying anybody's name wrong. Awesome. Okay. Okay. So
This is a pretty
moving on from there, here are some common practices for adaptivity, which is really what is viability determined by the business owner or who pays for it? Oh, what a great question, Tracy. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second to talk about that. So is viability determined? So I am a business owner, and as a business owner, I'm also the only employee in my company. So that makes it a little easier. But viability is, do I have more money coming in than I have going out? And if I've taken a temporary loss, because sometimes that happens, you take a loan on or you invest in your business. If I've taken a temporary loss, do I believe it will return me to viability or better viability on the other side? That's really the question we're answering there. But the who decides is a question that has to be decided by the organization. And if you're in the portfolio spaces, one of the questions you'd be asking is, how do we make this decision of viability? And you would be helping establish the working agreements for the organization on how that decision is made. I realize that's really a fuzzy answer, but hopefully it helped. All right. Yes, Paul, it would require a high level of trust, motivation, and common belief. And do you know what that comes from? Highly engaged personnel. So if you focus on engagement, you often get that altruism that you're looking for. It does mean that a company has to really, like the values they write on the wall, they have to really live them, because the minute somebody doesn't live the values, it degrades the trust of the people in there, and they start to look out for themselves and not for the whole. Keeping folks in a community-oriented space is tough. So here are some common adaptive practices that can help with that. So small autonomous teams. Now, if you've been in Agile for a long time, we've been singing that song for a very long time, but we want our teams to be relatively small because it reduces the amount of overhead. And we want them to be autonomous, able to make decisions to get their work over the finish line without having to go to a dependent group. If they do have a dependency, then we need to enable sort of collaboration between those two spaces. Self-management. So I don't need somebody to tell me what to do. I can figure it out for myself. This does require a high amount of transparency. Enablement instead of direction. So I'm not telling people what to do. I'm telling people where we're going, and then I'm helping remove roadblocks as a leader. Improving communication. So generally speaking, we don't all go into our adulthood with good communication skills. I know I've been working on them for the past 2 decades or more. And this is often a place where the portfolio can play in if you've got them in collaboration with your Agile coaches for learning good communication skills and making sure that communication is frequent and transparent. And then building collective intelligence. And this is something that I think gets missed for portfolio managers. They are essentially the historian of the organization, and they're taking the stuff we've learned in our experiments and spreading that good wealth out into the organization so other people don't have to go through the same pain to learn that lesson. I want to share an example of an adaptive organization, and that is Morningstar Tomato Processing Plant. So they delegate all their decisions to the person who sees the problem. They have an advice and consent process in place to formalize decisions. But let's say I'm working on the tomato processing line and I see a machine needs to be repaired or taken offline. I am free to make that decision as long as I've followed the advice process and gotten the consent of anybody that impacts, which would include the CFO. And do we have the finances to make this decision? Another company is in the Netherlands. It's called Buurtzorg. It's spelled Buurtzorg. It's a healthcare company. And it has small nursing centers that are entirely autonomous. The corporate office focuses on connecting nurses to each other for education and communicating changes in regulations and leveraging their size to increase buying power. The corporate office gives no direction on how each nursing center works, only advice based on what they've seen in other places. So they're basically a communication hub inside the organization. So these are being done in places you wouldn't expect to see them, and it can be emulated in our agile spaces. All right, what would it be like to work in a place that functioned like this? And if you work in a place like this, what is it like to work in a place that functions like this? Okay, seeing some good comments there. Invigorating, very great, would encourage creativity. How many of you would feel engaged in this kind of environment? So the more, as a portfolio manager, the more you can enable this kind of environment, the more likely it is people are going to do awesome things because they're engaged. Oh, and that's great to hear, Tracy. Where do you work? Some people might want to look up jobs. All right. So metrics. So metrics. And you may be surprised by the first slide that comes up here. Because metrics is a piece of agile governance. When we think about governance, and we think also about self-management, the idea around governance is to provide people with the information they need so they can make rules that stay in, or so they can make decisions that stay in alignment with the vision and direction for the company. And that's not just vision and direction of the products we're delivering or the value we're trying to deliver, but also what the company is trying to be, what the company's culture is, and if the company was a person, what would that person be? And that's another aspect to this that we don't often talk about in these spaces. So metrics really is this one angle on governance, which is how will we measure the performance of the portfolio and how will we leverage metrics to inspect and adapt? And that second one is really tricky. How do we learn from what we've heard and then change what we're doing? But there's certainly some other ones here. Alignment is aligning to strategy. We're going to make all of our expectations explicit. So anybody ever worked in a place that had unlimited PTO, but you weren't really supposed to take the PTO? That's an implicit expectation and not an explicit expectation. It's written in paper that you have unlimited PTO, but it's frowned upon for you to take it, and your boss often won't approve it. That means you don't have unlimited PTO. And that disjoint of expectations creates disengagement in an environment. So we want to make sure that our verbalized and written expectations are clear and that our behaviors around them that drive those expectations are consistent. Transparency is critical. One of the factors of being able to make decisions and being self-managing is I have to have all the information necessary to make a good and informed decision. So transparency is really critical. And we're going for practices over documentation. So how will we inspect and adapt on practices of the portfolio? So what's the portfolio doing? How are they working? How will they inspect and adapt? And how will we enable teams to and allow them to self-management? We don't have to document everything. It can be just a way of working, and that's okay too. And then we want to make sure we stay aligned with the Agile Manifesto. So that's the idea around Agile governance. What we're going to dive into here in this next couple of slides is metrics. So an example of metrics for outcomes could be OKRs and vision. They need to cascade to different levels. I want to just put a caveat in for OKRs. If at the strategic level you have more than three O's, three objectives, you probably have too many. I know one company that's got 27. How are you going to even get any of that done? We want to put as many people as possible in the number one objective. And we might actually want to make the objective smaller and more immediate. So just keep that in mind. I highly recommend a book called Measure What Matters if you're in a company that uses OKRs to get those right and to do them in a healthier way. We also want to measure flow, like the cycle time. How long does it take us to finish initiatives? How long is our lead time? How many initiatives do we have in the backlog that have been waiting for more than a year or two? Should we just cancel them because they're clearly not important enough that we're going to do them? So those kinds of questions, same kinds of questions you would ask if you were, say, a product manager over a product. And then competency. Oh, I'm so sorry, Chris. OKR stands for Objective Key Result. And it is a commonly used strategic metric at the top tiers of organizations and is often cascaded down to teams. And then competency, measure how competent the organization and team is in relation to LPM and agility. So this is essentially an agility health metric or a portfolio health metric. The idea is that we want vision and strategy to be communicated down, and we want data and information to come up so vision and strategy can be adjusted, and then to try new things. So this should be sort of these two areas should be in constant flow with one another. The data and information that has to come up are metrics that help inform our vision and strategy. Typically down at the team level, we've got folks, product owners talking to customers. Ideally, we've got our teams right in front of the customers, seeing how they're using tools. And we've got data here that could help make better decisions at the strategic level. But we also have data at the strategic level that can help the teams make good decisions. So we want that flow of information back and forth. All right, we've got about 12 minutes left. And I've gone through sort of just a little taster about what lean portfolio management is. This class's intention is to teach you how to do these things and to give you tools and techniques that you can take back to your work and try in your spaces and experiment with as well. And I wanted to leave some time for questions. Tracy, that question is a hard one for me to answer, and let me explain why. An objective key result, I would say the KPI is a key result, key performance indicator might be underneath the objective. An objective, I have a tendency to just be like, where do we want to go and how do we want to measure it? And I don't worry about a lot of these acronyms. That is just a flaw of my own. But I would call a KPI a form of a KR in an objective key result. The objective in those is some like stretchy, hard to reach, visionary ideal. And the key result is the actual metric you're going to take to see if you're succeeding. And I feel like KPIs fall into that zone. I'm certainly open if somebody disagrees with me, please feel free to have that conversation in chat. I welcome it. All right, what other questions are out there? Okay, well, stay tuned. If you are interested in taking this course, you can go to softed.com and look under our course catalog to find it. I'm happy to hang around for a minute if people have some additional questions. We've got about 10 minutes left. Stay tuned for Softed's. Softed has this whole series of webinars that they put out. Great to get these little primers like this and little overviews. The name of the Softed course is Lean Portfolio Management. Oh, I'm so sorry, folks. I forgot to open the Q&A. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Cheatin, if you want to just copy some over, that would be great. Those of the KPI versus OKR link. Paul, if you've got one, please feel free to put it in. I don't have one handy. Matthew, stay tuned. I believe that SoftEd will put out an announcement on LinkedIn, and I believe that if you registered for this course, you'll also get an email when that webinar is made available. Oh, All right, I got a question over in Q&A. It came up. What are some of the current trends you are seeing? Trends about what, Christopher? Trends about portfolio, I assume. The biggest trend we're seeing is a move towards lean portfolio management. It's one of the reasons why Softed put this course together. And I think we see a persistent trend in Agile communities about divisive arguments about SAFe, whether or not it's good or not. And SAFe, of course, has a portfolio management path as well. I'm not sure what other trends. There's lots of trends around AI. So I was seeing trends around the cloud when AWS first hit the scene. What had happened was I saw a bunch of people put special teams together to learn how to use it. And some of those trends have stayed. Some people have kept cloud, some people have gone away from cloud, some people use a mix. And really the goal was to learn cloud and then teach it to other people. So the trend I'm seeing in cloud is that now they've got it, they understand what they're doing, and they're trying to teach teams inside their organizations to use it on their own, or create more self-service spaces around that. The big trend I'm seeing now is the movement towards AI. We're seeing a big push in the AI space from a technology perspective. Though it is important to note that the trends I tend to pay attention to have more to do with people trends, like work from home versus back in the office. I don't think I can answer that question. I have a bias. So I got a question is there more advantage to taking LPM or SAFe practice consultant for job opportunities? And it's going to be hard for me to answer. I have a bias. And I would say, look at the jobs you're interested in and do a little like scratch poll, which ones are asking for SAFe and which ones are just asking for experience and lean. And you'll probably have a good measure. Certainly working in a SAFe space is marketable. I wouldn't personally want to work in a SAFe environment, but that's just my own interest. And so I don't tend to look for jobs that are looking for SAFe. So it's a little tough for me to answer. I think it depends on what you want. If you want to work in a SAFe environment, then obviously the SAFe practice consultant is more important. And if you want to work in a more agile agnostic environment, then LPM may be better suited. The other thing to note is that it's just like, I'm going to look for an agile coaching job. If I were looking for job opportunities, I'm not going to look for an engineering job. It's the same sort of approach, but I would say go look at the roles you're interested in and see what they're asking for. Okay. Cheatin, I thought I answered that question already. What is the meaning of portfolio? Portfolio is the whole body of work your company is trying to deliver. If you look at it from a project management perspective, yes, it is a grouping of similar programs, which are groupings of similar projects. But portfolio in this sense is the body of work that we're investing in as an organization. That is in fact one of the mindset shifts that has to happen for folks coming into this lean portfolio management. Is it's not just a group of programs and a group of projects anymore. It's really, what are we trying to do as an organization? And your name is the hardest one. I hope I'm saying it right for me to guess on. All right, everyone, we've got about 4 minutes to go, so I'm going to close this out here. Thank you so much for your participation in the chat and communicating with one another and with me. It helps me feel like I'm not talking into the abyss. And then we've got a couple more comments in there. Tell you what, Tracy, why don't you connect with me on LinkedIn? That sounds like a really interesting conversation. I'd be happy to have a 30-minute call on that and we could just talk about it. Wonderful. Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great afternoon or evening or day, wherever you are. And I will hopefully see you again in a future event. Thank you so much.